Of the 5 original nations of the Haudenosaunee people, one stands apart: the Oneida, people of the Standing Stone. That's because they bet on the United States when it was merely an idea. They were America's first allies, but their story is largely forgotten. And for a time, the country turned its back on them. But we should never forget their story, which is ongoing and a fundamental part of Central New York history. There's no way to wrap up an entire people in one short video, but I'm going to do my best to highlight a journey that is an ongoing testament to resilience and cultural preservation. Legends like Chief Hanieri and his wife and son defending the cause of freedom at Oriskany, or Polly Cooper, who walked hundreds of miles to feed a starving Continental Army at Valley Forge, deserve to be remembered. Long before the Europeans arrived in America, the Oneida belonged to a Haudenosaunee confederacy, along with the Mohawk, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and later Tuscarora nations. Referred to as the Iroquois by the French, these were the people of the Longhouse, and they had a highly sophisticated democratic system with a strong emphasis on peace and unity. And if you don't think this influenced the U.S. Constitution, think again. The arrival of the Europeans led to the exchange of goods, but also introduced diseases that would devastate indigenous populations. They also brought muskets, which would play a big role in the Beaver Wars of the 1600s and later the 7 Years' War. During those conflicts, an amicable relationship began to form with the British and the Haudenosaunee in opposition to the French and allied Huron. For example, in modern-day Rome, New York, the Oneida Nation allowed the British to create a military defense located at an important portage route known as the Deo Wainsta, or simply the Oneida Carry. The defense was called Fort Stanwix, and it had a palisade fence that mimicked the style of nearby Oneida villages in what is now Oneida County. By the way, if you didn't know why it was called Oneida, this video is for you. These villages had longhouses that housed nuclear families, and they cultivated crops such as corn, beans, and squash, and had a very rich culture. Each member belonged to one of 3 clans: Turtle, Wolf, and Bear. And there was a complex matrilineal kinship system where children belonged to their mother's clan. In this society, women were given considerable respect and influence compared to their European counterparts. After the 7 Years' War in 1763, the British drew a line between settlers and natives. This line was altered 5 years later by the so-called Superintendent of Indian Affairs, Sir William Johnson, and this led to a loss of Oneida territory, fueling animosity towards the British, and also setting a trend of taking Oneida land. When the War for Independence began in the mid-1770s, both English settlers and Haudenosaunee nations had to make a choice. Initially, the Haudenosaunee remained neutral, but events forced them to choose a side despite the Confederacy's founding principle of peace. It was a very complex situation. Side with the British, side with the colonists. Many of the nations chose the British, who were promising autonomy and freedom, but that's what the Continentals were offering as well. In the Oneida's case, they had strong ties to local patriot settlers, and the highly influential chief Shenandoah had a strong relationship with Samuel Kirkland, a pro-American missionary. So a majority of them were already leaning towards the patriot side, with many Tuscaroras doing the same. And it all came to a head in 1777, when a large British force, including Seneca, Mohawk, and Cayuga allies, were moving towards the Patriot-held Fort Stanwix in Oneida Territory. The Oneida Nation made it clear that this force needed permission to enter their lands, but were outright ignored, and hence many of them resolved to defend the Patriot Bastion. A woman known as Tyona Janigan alerted settlers of the approaching British threat, and because of this, local militia linked up with Wolf Clan Oneida warriors under her husband, Chief Hanieri, who were all ambushed on their way to Fort Stanwix in one of the bloodiest battles of the entire war, known as the Battle of Oriskany. It tore the Haudenosaunee apart, as they had officially fought one another. The Oneida continued to support the fledgling nation, helping to achieve victory at Saratoga, supplying troops at Valley Forge, and fighting alongside Continental forces at Barren Hill. Respected Oneida leaders declared friendship between America and the Oneida, and they were even recognized by the Continental Congress. After the Sullivan expedition in 1779, however, extensive destruction led to the defection of many Oneida to the British. Regardless, many Oneida continued to fight alongside the colonists until the war's end. The Treaty of Fort Stanwix in 1784 granted favorable treatment to the nation in recognition of their service. And 10 years later, the Treaty of Canandaigua granted 6 million acres of land to them. However, Oneida sachems like Good Peter were already protesting the increasing pressure to cede their lands to the expanding United States. And it only got worse. After a series of treaties and actions by the state, their land was drastically reduced to only 32 acres by 1900. By that time, many Oneida had settled in Ontario and Wisconsin due to the leadership of people like Chief Daniel Bread in a tough situation. In the 20th century, many Oneida advocated for land claims, and after a series of treaties and legal disputes, a landmark agreement was reached in 2013, which helped to recover over 10,000 acres of their original homelands. Currently, there's over 16,000 Oneida tribe members, with the majority residing in Wisconsin. There are still many in New York, however, in Verona, Oneida, and Canastota. They've created successful business ventures like a tax-free gas station and the Turning Stone Casino. Their story has been full of tragedy. But today's Oneida culture preserves traditions in our modern world and passes on things like their language to children. And the journey continues. If you want to learn more about the Oneida people, don't get it from me. Go to places like the Cultural Center in the city of Oneida. For a long time, their story was either forgotten or overlooked. Despite this, Oneida warriors have participated in every major American conflict since, and we should never forget their contributions. An important title as America's first allies. Have a good one.